Hi, my name is Amanda, and I'm 36 years old. The last time my sister Julia saw me in uniform, I was just 21. Fresh out of basic training, sharp-angled, proud, and completely unaware of how much she already resented me. I can still hear her voice, soft enough to pretend it was private but loud enough to cut me open. It's just a phase. She'll be back working retail in a year. She whispered it to her then boyfriend, but she wanted me to hear it. That's how it always was between us. Her words carefully sharpened like blades, disguised as casual remarks, meant to remind me of my place in her world. 15 years later, that whisper still echoes, though the battlefield has changed. I wasn't standing on a military parade ground anymore. Instead, I was seated inside a courtroom, colder and smaller than any interrogation room I had ever known during my years in the Navy. It wasn't combat in the traditional sense, but it felt more dangerous than anything I'd faced overseas. It was a probate hearing, a legal battleground for the soul of my father Charles's legacy. My father had built Titan Dynamics with his own hands. What started as a small aerospace workshop had grown into a respected defense technology company, admired for its brilliant innovations. Titan Dynamics wasn't just a business. It was his art, his life's purpose. And now that he was gone, my sister Julia was trying to pry it from his hands even in death, twisting his vision to serve her husband Kevin's empire. Kevin, the polished CEO with a vulture's smile, had been waiting for this moment. I sat quietly at the defense table, my hands folded neatly over a plain leather portfolio. My suit was charcoal gray, my hair pulled back in a disciplined bun. I looked like an officer should, composed, controlled, unshaken. But inside me, a cold fury coiled, the same fury that had been there for decades of family dinners where I was the outsider, the quiet one, the odd sister who had chosen the Navy over suburban perfection. Julia, sitting across the room beside Kevin, dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief as if she were the grieving, responsible daughter. She was always the performer, the golden child who had stayed home, gone to the right schools, married the perfect man. And me? To her, I was just the failure who ran away to sea because I couldn't find my place. She had never seen the truth of my life, and today in this courtroom, she was determined to make sure no one else saw it either. The judge, Harper, looked weary as he settled into his chair. He'd probably seen 100 families tear each other apart in this very room. To him, I might have been just another bitter heir squabbling over money. But this wasn't about money for me. This was about my father's trust. About the quiet conversations I'd had with him when he admitted he didn't trust Kevin's intentions. About the way he'd told me with pride in his voice, "You're my safeguard, Amanda. You'll see the vultures when no one else does." And now, as Julia's lawyer Anthony rose in his pristine $5,000 suit, ready to tear me apart with words dipped in venom, I felt the weight of my father's last words pressing down on me. Anthony, Julia's expensive lawyer, rose with deliberate confidence. His navy blue suit gleamed under the courtroom lights, every stitch screaming money and power. His voice was smooth, oiled with false pity, as he addressed Judge Harper. "Your Honor," he began, turning his eyes toward me as if I were a fragile object on display. "We are here to decide whether Amanda, though commendable for her years of service, has the qualifications to guide Titan Dynamics into the future. The truth, however uncomfortable, is this: she does not." He let the words hang in the air before continuing. "For 2 decades, she has lived a transient life as a Navy officer. She's been stationed overseas, moving from one base to another, with no roots, no assets, no permanent ties to this community. She has no business background, no understanding of corporate governance, no record of building or managing a company." His tone sharpened, almost theatrical. "We are talking about a multi-million-dollar defense technology firm, Titan Dynamics. To entrust it to someone with nothing more than a uniform and a string of relocations would be irresponsible. My client Julia has lived her entire life grounded here. She understands her father's world. She has the guidance of her husband Kevin, a respected CEO in this very industry. That is the leadership Titan Dynamics deserves." I sat perfectly still, my hands still folded on my portfolio, eyes steady on the judge. But inside me, the familiar fire was burning. I had heard this narrative before, not just from Anthony, but from Julia herself over the years. Every family holiday had carried the same undertone. I was the misfit, the shadow, the sister who ran away. Julia leaned into the performance as if she had rehearsed it her whole life. She pressed a handkerchief to her eyes, glancing upward with a trembling voice. "Your Honor, I love my sister dearly," she said, her voice cracking at the perfect moment. But she never wanted this. She never wanted Titan dynamics. She always chose the Navy, chose a life far away from home. She follows orders, she files reports, but this is about vision, innovation, survival. She just doesn't understand that world. She gestured softly toward Kevin, who nodded solemnly, playing his part as the wise, steady businessman. "Kevin has been advising me," Julia continued. "He believes in my father's vision. With his expertise, we can ensure Titan Dynamics not only survives, but thrives." Her words were a dagger wrapped in silk. My father would have burned his company to the ground before letting Kevin touch it. He had told me that himself on late-night calls, his voice raspy but sharp. "That man is a vulture, Amanda. He doesn't build, he consumes. Watch him closely." And now, here was Julia, spinning lies to paint me as weak and herself as the savior. I kept my composure, but my jaw tightened. The judge leaned back in his chair, tired eyes glancing from Julia to me, already looking convinced by the narrative they had crafted. I was the shadow again. The lesser sister. The one who didn't belong. But what Julia didn't know was that shadows can hide more than weakness, they can hide power. Mr. Martin, my lawyer, stood up slowly, deliberately. He wasn't flashy like Anthony. No $1,000 grin. No designer cufflinks. He was calm, methodical. Exactly the kind of man you'd want by your side when the world was trying to erase you. "Miss Julia," he began softly, his voice measured. "You testified that your sister has spent her career in, as you put it, administrative support roles. How did you come to that conclusion?" Julia blinked, her composure flickering for the first time. "Well," she said with a delicate shrug, "that's what she's always told us. Classified this, classified that. I understand secrecy, but after 20 years one would expect something. A command title, a visible achievement. She's never shown us anything. No proof." The insult landed in the courtroom like a knife on marble. Sharp and deliberate. Julia smiled faintly, confident she'd struck her blow. Mr. Martin nodded slowly. "So you admit you don't actually know her specific role, her rank, or her commendations within the Navy?" Julia hesitated, then waved her hand dismissively. "I know she's some kind of officer. But the details? No. She never shared." The corners of Martin's mouth twitched almost imperceptibly. He glanced at me before turning back to the judge. "No further questions." Judge Harper sighed, adjusting his glasses. "Very well. Does the defense have any rebuttal to the claims of Ms. Amanda's lack of business experience?" Martin's tone shifted, filled with quiet power. "We do, Your Honor. We have one rebuttal witness. But first, I would like to submit to the court my client's unredacted service record and a letter of commendation from her commanding officer." He carried a thick folder to the clerk, who handed copies to the judge and Anthony. The effect was immediate. Anthony flipped open the file, his confident smirk faltering. His eyes scanned the pages, and the color drained slightly from his face. He leaned toward Kevin and whispered something urgently. Kevin's jaw clenched, his smug facade cracking. Julia glanced nervously between them, her expression tightening. The judge's eyebrows lifted higher and higher as he read. His weariness seemed to vanish, replaced with sharp focus. Finally, he looked at me, not with dismissal, but with a new and searching curiosity. "I see," Judge Hopper said slowly, his voice carrying weight. "Lieutenant Commander Amanda." He paused, his gaze holding mine. "Very impressive." Julia's head snapped toward me, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open. The title echoed in the room like a hammer strike. I wasn't just her shadow. I wasn't just a uniform. I was far more than she had ever dared imagine. And the storm was only beginning. The courtroom doors swung open, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. A ripple of murmurs moved through the small gallery as a man in full Navy dress uniform strode down the aisle, shoulders squared, chest a wall of medals and ribbons. Admiral James Carter. I felt my breath catch, though my face stayed still. His presence was like steel brought into a room of paper. Even Judge Harper straightened, his fatigue replaced with sharp attention. "Admiral Carter," Harper said with sudden respect. To what do we owe this honor? The Admiral raised his right hand, was sworn in, and then settled into the witness chair with calm authority. His voice was low but carried through every corner of the room. I'm here on behalf of one of my officers, he said, turning his head slightly toward me. Lieutenant Commander Amanda. Julia's face crumpled in disbelief. Kevin's smugness vanished, replaced by a look of pure dread. Anthony shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his bravado evaporating. The Admiral's eyes fixed on the judge. I understand questions have been raised regarding her qualifications and her role in the Navy. Let me be perfectly clear. Amanda is not an administrator. She is a decorated intelligence officer. For the past 18 months, she has been leading a joint investigation, Operation Steeltide, focused on defense contract fraud. The gallery gasped, whispers cutting through the air. Admiral Carter's gaze shifted like a blade locking onto its mark. Kevin. One of the primary companies under investigation is led by Mr. Kevin. His corporation has been defrauding the government of millions through substandard components in critical naval systems. Kevin went pale, his hands trembling slightly on the table. Julia looked at him, panic flashing across her face. The Admiral leaned forward, his words slow, deliberate. Amanda's so-called transient life, her lack of assets, her secrecy, it was all necessary for her cover. She was the safeguard your father intended, Judge. She was protecting Titan Dynamics from vultures. The word hit me like an echo from my father's voice. Vultures. Julia gasped, shaking her head. No. No, this can't be. But Kevin already knew it was over. Silence fell so heavy in the courtroom it felt like the air itself had turned solid. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, her fingers frozen above the keys. Kevin sat rigid, his jaw locked, eyes darting between the Admiral and me. For the first time I saw fear in him. Not the smug, calculated arrogance he usually wore like a suit of armor, but raw, bone-deep fear. Admiral Carter continued, his voice cutting through the stillness. Lieutenant Commander Amanda's record shows years of commendations and specialized operations. She has prevented sabotage, uncovered espionage, and led teams in counter-fraud missions critical to national security. She is one of my finest officers. To question her competence is not just wrong, it borders on obstruction of justice. Anthony shifted in his seat, his handkerchief dabbing sweat at his forehead. His eyes flickered toward Julia, who looked like someone had just pulled the floor out from beneath her. Judge Harper's gaze hardened as he set the file down on the bench. He tapped his gavel once, the sound sharp, commanding. In light of this testimony, and the evidence submitted, this court finds that the petition to remove Lieutenant Commander Amanda as co-trustee is denied with prejudice. Julia's head snapped toward him, her face twisting with desperation. Your Honor. But Harper cut her off, his voice booming. Furthermore, given the evidence of potential fraud and criminal motives surrounding Mr. Kevin's involvement, I am granting Lieutenant Commander Amanda sole trusteeship and full control of Titan Dynamics, effective immediately, pending ongoing federal investigations. The gavel struck again, echoing like a gunshot. Behind me, the heavy footsteps of federal agents moved closer. Two men in dark suits approached Kevin calmly but decisively. One spoke in a low, firm voice. Kevin, you're under arrest for federal defense contract fraud. The clink of handcuffs filled the room. Julia screamed, a raw, guttural sound that made the gallery gasp. She lunged toward Kevin, but one of the agents blocked her gently, holding her back. Kevin's expensive suit suddenly looked cheap, his face ashen, hollow. His empire, his confidence, was gone in an instant. I stood, smoothing down my suit jacket. My father's words echoed inside me. You'll see the vultures when no one else does. And today, one had finally been caught. Julia collapsed back into her chair, her silk handkerchief crumpled in her fist, her eyes wide with shock as Kevin was led away in handcuffs. The gallery buzzed with whispers, but to me, the room felt unnervingly quiet, every sound muffled by the pounding of my heart. Mr. Martin placed a steady hand on my shoulder. Well done, he whispered, his voice calm but carrying the weight of triumph. Admiral Carter approached me, his uniform pristine, his gaze steady and professional. He didn't offer me a smile. He wasn't here for comfort. He simply gave me the words I had waited years to hear. Good work, Commander. Your father would be proud. Something tightened in my chest, but I forced myself to nod. "Thank you, sir." When the Admiral left, the courtroom suddenly felt smaller, emptier, like the oxygen had been sucked out of it. And there was Julia. Her face was streaked with ruined makeup, her posture broken, her eyes darting between me and the door where Kevin had been taken. Her world had just shattered in front of her, and she was staring at the rubble. "Amanda," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't know. I never knew." I studied her. This woman who had mocked my uniform, dismissed my sacrifices, and tried to rip Titan Dynamics out of my father's hands with a smile on her face. This woman who had built her whole life on belittling me. I felt nothing. No pity. No forgiveness. Just a cold emptiness where a sister's love should have been. "No, Julia," I said softly but firmly, my voice carrying across the silent courtroom. "You didn't know because you never bothered to look." Her lips parted, but no words came. I turned, gathered my leather portfolio, and walked toward the exit. Each step felt lighter than the last, as if I was shedding 20 years of shadows. When I pushed open the heavy courtroom doors, the sunlight outside hit my face. The city air was sharp, clean, almost electric. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking away from home. I was walking into it. The courthouse steps stretched before me, wide and gleaming under the midday sun. Reporters had already gathered, cameras clicking like gunfire, voices calling out questions I had no intention of answering. I kept my chin high, my stride measured, the same way I'd walked down Navy decks in ports across the world. Behind me, I could still hear Julia's cries echoing faintly from inside the building, but I didn't look back. That chapter was closed. For years, she had insisted I was the shadow, the one who didn't belong, the one who would never measure up. And yet, in the end, it was her perfect world that had crumbled, not mine. As I descended the stairs, Mr. Martin caught up with me, his briefcase tucked under his arm. "Amanda," he said, his voice low so the microphones couldn't catch it, "you know this is just the beginning. Titan Dynamics is yours now, but so is everything that comes with it. Scrutiny, responsibility, enemies." I nodded, my eyes fixed ahead. "I know," I replied. "My father didn't build it to be easy. He built it to matter." We reached the bottom of the steps where Admiral Carter was waiting near a black sedan. He gave me a curt nod. "Commander," he said formally, "we'll be in touch regarding Operation Steel Tide. But for now, Titan Dynamics is secure." That was the mission. For a moment, I let those words sink in. The mission is complete. Except this one wasn't stamped on orders or filed in a Navy archive. This one was personal, etched into my bones. As the Admiral's car pulled away, I finally allowed myself a long, steady breath. The air tasted different now. Not like ash, not like shadows, but like freedom. I glanced up at the towering skyline and imagined my father's voice, the way it used to rumble through the workshop when he was alive. "You watch the vultures, Amanda. You watch them close." I had. And I'd won. That evening, I sat alone in my father's old office at Titan Dynamics. The room still smelled faintly of him. Coffee, machine oil, and the leather-bound notebooks he never went anywhere without. Sunlight spilled across his desk, illuminating the blueprints he had left behind, each line drawn with patience and vision. For years, I had been told I didn't belong here. Julia had built her story on the belief that I was unworthy, that I was just passing through life, a soldier with no roots. But here I was now, the sole guardian of my father's life's work. And not because of chance, but because he had trusted me to see what others couldn't. I sat in his chair, running my fingers lightly across the wood. The silence in the room felt sacred, heavy with everything he had built. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like the odd one out in my family. I felt like the rightful heir, not to money or status, but to purpose. Out the window, the city lights flickered on, one by one, like stars appearing against the night sky. Each light reminded me of the years I had spent away. Deployments, investigations, sleepless nights. Sacrifices Julia never understood. Sacrifices she never even cared to ask about. But now the truth was undeniable. I was not the shadow. I was not the failure. I was the one who had carried both duty and legacy when no one else would. I thought of Julia, broken and lost, her perfect mask shattered. A part of me wondered if she would ever understand the damage she had caused. But another colder part of me knew it didn't matter. Some wounds can't be repaired. Some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness. I closed my father's notebook and whispered into the empty office, as if he were still there. I've got it now, Dad. Titan Dynamics is safe. You can rest. When I stood and walked out, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of judgment, the sting of mockery, the endless need to prove myself, it was all gone. My name is Amanda. I'm 36 years old. I'm not the shadow anymore. I am the protector of my father's legacy. And the sister who ended the betrayal. On Revenge Repeat, one truth is clear. Betrayal cuts the deepest when it comes from family. But tell me, if it happened to you, would you choose revenge or forgiveness?